Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane, near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us, since we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6, and I love it. The houses are small but well-kept, good-sized yards. Plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only the two strange things here, the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the U.S. as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster. Oh, and he tells us not to think about it so much, and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom. I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month, I think she sits out there on our big red couch, just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful, da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-dum. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either, but good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things, winning a radio contest or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good and there's no crime and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings, I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day. Oh, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad. But the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again, no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom, and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m. only to find my dad awake, sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat, and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. Da-da, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-dum. It came and it went, just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring them macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously, or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in across the street from us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good, long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about the locking shutters, since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing, since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12. A year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who is always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The 3 of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner, Holden said. Mr. Tolles? My sister asked. No way, he's really nice. Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer then. Nola tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go in my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever even tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't... See, I can't even try to look, because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key, he continued, ignoring me. So does our dad, said Nola. No, replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. Oh, he keeps it right on his normal keychain. So? I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next. Because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years. Because he knew we took it seriously. So, after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom. And on my way, I may have peeked into their room and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to blinds. Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. You're lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand. Stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. I hurried over to my parents' room but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry, I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Nola! I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed, balled to the face. But I found myself moving. I'm not fast, I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. Don't look, okay? I told her. Don't turn around. We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm, not holding Nola, and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. Holden? I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blinds shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lips so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night, in that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched on his face, a parent's fear. "Just Holden?" he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." Thud, thud, thud. This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. "Thud, thud, thud, call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. "Do you think—" He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap, tap, tap. "Police," something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "To a police. Call the police." Tap, 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 police. My mom pulled us closer. "Police, police, police, police." "Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook. Then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back to front, loud, then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop!" Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it, a soft tap, 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 coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner, watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back. All so loud it was possible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. Okay, he told us. It's done. Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week, but by Thursday there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies. But even those that live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower, if she'd looked out the window that night. Would I have looked too, to comfort her, to share that burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore, and my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. G.T.M. Hello Story 2. The poster read, Happiness, sold in glass jars, call today. And underneath the text was a phone number. I was walking home from a long, exhausting day of work when I caught a glimpse of the paper stapled on an old telephone pole. I took a picture of it, thinking it was amusing. I was going to show my wife once I got to our apartment, but I was caught up with chores and forgot about it. Dinner, dishes, laundry, packing a snack for our daughter, putting her to bed, then putting her toys away that she'd left out in the living room. Every night, it was the exact same routine. The next day, I awoke sleeping back to back with my wife. I always had to get up earlier than she did for my job, so I quietly got ready for the day and headed out the door. At work, I was updating the company's latest expense report. Most days were similar to this one. They were basically paying me to stare at a computer for 9 hours a day and input a couple numbers into a spreadsheet. I finished my work very quickly, so I decided to head out of the office early. It also helped that it was a Friday, and a lot of people leave early at the end of the week. On my walk back, I was thinking of what my life had become. I did this often. I always dreamed of traveling when I was younger. I wanted to drive across the country or solo backpack across Europe. Then I met Kelsey. Don't get me wrong, I loved Kelsey. I mean, I still do. We just don't have that spark anymore. When you meet someone and get in a relationship, whether it's meant to be or not, some of your personal life plans have to be put on hold. And then that relationship turns to marriage, and then you have a baby. Then you have to enroll your daughter in a preschool. Then you have to get a better paying job and work more hours, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to throw a pity party for myself. I'm just saying I wasn't exactly content with where I was in my life. I wouldn't have referred to myself as a happy person. As I took the same route home that I did every day to work and back, I walked by the same poster I had passed the day before. I don't know why, I really don't, but I decided to call the number. I figured it would be some joke. Maybe someone just picks up and says, "I love you," on the other end and hangs up. Or maybe it's a line to a sex worker. I had no idea what to expect. I called. It only rang once before someone picked up. "Hello," a woman said. Hi, I'm calling about your poster, your ad." "Oh, awesome. Go say," she said calmly. "When do you want to pick it up?" "Pick what up?" "The jar," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Oh, of course, I realized then that I had left work early without telling Kelsey, so I could just go pick it up now and she'd be none the wiser. "What exactly is it that you're selling?" "I just told you. It's happiness, in a glass jar, like the poster said. Happiness keeps best in glass jars. They're more durable than, say, a plastic bag." Okay. Should we meet somewhere?" "For sure. I don't want you to end up being a creep or something, so let's go to a public place." The public place we decided on was a Starbucks parking lot, a little over a mile from me. Now, I didn't think I was really going to be buying a jar of happiness or whatever. I was 99% sure she was going to sell me drugs. Maybe heroin would be in the jar. I remember thinking, oh no. Happiness is probably a nickname for some street drug, and I'm going to a drug deal. What if she's a cop? Am I going to be arrested? But something inside me told me to keep walking, and so I did. I stood outside and texted her, me. "I'm here." Her. "Cool. Be there in a sec." Me. "What are you driving?" Her. "Silver Camry." And as her final text came through, I saw her car pull in. She took a spot not too far from where I stood. I could see there was no one else in the car, which put my kidnapping fear to rest. She opened her door and stood on the pavement, looking around until her eyes met mine. I gave her a little nod of acknowledgement. She simply responded by waving her hand, gesturing for me to come over to her car, so I did. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with curly golden hair. Her skin was pale and contrasted with the all-black outfit she was wearing. I thought she looked like Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz had put on the Wicked Witch's clothes. "Nice day out," she said as a greeting. "Oh, yeah, it is. Hadn't really paid attention to it." "You were the one that called about the jar, right?" "Yeah, that was me." "Cool. Well, here you go." She handed me a very small glass mason jar. It couldn't have been more than 2 inches tall. Inside of it was a light. Not a light bulb, just light. It was like someone bottled up sunshine. It glowed even in the mid-afternoon daylight. It looked like a tiny sun. Or a tiny universe existing in this little crystal-walled home. I was admiring it with no attempt to hide the awe on my face. "Pretty rad, isn't it?" "What? What is it?" "You've asked that, like, 3 different times, I think. My answer is still the same. It is happiness. Happiness in a glass jar." "What do I do with it?" "Keep it," she said simply. "If you have any problems, shoot me a text." She started to get into her car. "Wait," I said. "I thought you were selling this. How much is it?" "Don't worry, man," she said with a smile. "You'll pay." She closed her door and I stepped out of her way as she backed up, then drove off. What the hell had just happened? What was I holding? I looked down at the jar again. Its radiance was simply mesmerizing. I put it in my pocket and could see its glow slightly through my pants, so I began to walk home. What was just a nice, sunny day quickly changed into a rainy one with clouds wrapping the sky. It was not forecasted that it would rain, or else I would have ridden the bus or subway to work that day. I jogged home, trying not to get too drenched. I finally found shelter once I made it to my apartment building. I walked up to my door and found that my key wasn't on my keyring anymore. Shit, I can't believe I lost it again, I thought. I knocked on the door and said in a somewhat loud voice, "Hey babe, it's me. I don't know what happened to my key." I heard the door being unlocked from the other side. When the door opened, I was greeted by a large, heavy-set man with greasy hair and unkempt goatee. He said, "I think you got the wrong door, bud." "Oh," I said, disoriented. "My bad. Sorry. Have a good one." He let out a chuckle as he closed the door. Apartment number 33. I know that was my apartment. I know it was. I'd been in apartment 33 for 5 years now, but that was not my apartment. From what I could see inside, all the furniture was different. It was painted a different color. It was all wrong. I felt like I'd hit my head and was drugged. In that moment, nothing made sense. I pulled out my phone to call Kelsey so she could calm me down and tell me I just got confused for a second. But her contact wasn't in my phone. In fact, nothing was in my phone. I had no messages with her, no previous calls, no pictures. It was like my phone reset to its factory settings. Did that girl somehow switch my phone out when I wasn't looking? I would have just dialed Kelsey's number manually, but I couldn't quite remember it. I had known it by heart before, but not anymore. I needed to get back to the office. I had all my contacts backed up on my work computer. Since it was still raining, I hopped on the bus, which had a stop right in front of the apartment complex. I rode downtown toward my office, the whole time staring at my wet shoes, wondering what the hell was going on. We have a keycard access to our building, so only authorized personnel can get inside. I always keep my access card in my wallet. Always. But, surprise, surprise, it wasn't there. I buzzed into the speaker we had for guests with appointments, or employees as a backup, in case anyone lost or forgot their card. "Busy Z, hey, this is Tim. I must have lost my card. My employee number is..." I stopped as I drew a blank. A voice came through the speaker. "Tim? You got cut out? What's your employee number?" I can't remember. That's fine. Just tell me your full name and department." Finance. I'm in finance. My full name is Tim Brooks." "One sec." About 30 seconds later, the man spoke to me again. "We don't have a Tim Brooks working in this building. Did you have an appointment with someone?" I backed up in surprise, almost tripping on my own feet. I had just been in that office an hour or two ago. What was happening to me? I felt like I was getting Alzheimer's, but going through every stage in one day. I stared at my hands, unsure if I was in the right body. I felt like the world around me was disintegrating. I wasn't in control. I was merely sitting inside somebody else's head, watching the world through their eyes. Just then, I got a text. I recognized the number immediately. Ah, it was that girl, the one who gave me the jar. I had forgotten all about it until I saw her text. Her. "Hey, how's it going?" I looked at my phone, dumbfounded. It made me angry she was so nonchalant about this. She knew what was going on. She had done this somehow. Me. "What the hell did you do to me?" Her. "The worst is yet to come." I was astronomically close to just chucking my phone as far as I could in frustration. I took the jar out of my pocket. It looked unchanged, still glowing just as bright. "What the fuck did you do?" I yelled at the jar, realizing I probably looked like a lunatic. As I stared at its glistening glass, I realized something. I didn't know what my wife's face looked like anymore. I knew her name. Well, I know it started with a K, or maybe a C. I couldn't picture her in my mind. I knew I had a wife. I knew I did. Yes, because I had a daughter. I had a wife and a daughter. I just couldn't remember their faces then, or their names, or their birthdays, or any memories I had with them. I know they existed. They did exist. I had just seen them that morning, right? I couldn't remember how she looked or what she smelled like. What was our first date? We had a wedding, right? What about our first kiss? Or my daughter, or was it my son? Maybe I didn't even have a kid, but my wife or girlfriend, she was real. I knew she was. The thought was tearing me apart. I couldn't see her in my head. I couldn't recall a single fact about her. I was standing outside of the same building, but I was unsure why I was. Did I work there? I must work somewhere. The rain was accompanied by a chilly wind now. It was whipping at my face, making my nose and cheeks sting. I wanted to go home. I wanted to be with her. I wanted to be warm. I wanted to go in to a shitty office job that kept a roof over my head. I wanted it all. I was soaking wet. I was miserable. I couldn't remember my parents or my childhood. Did I even have any friends? Why was I in the rain? I looked down at my hand. I was still clutching the jar. The only memory of my entire life I could concretely remember was that girl giving it to me, telling me it was happiness. It did not bring happiness. It brought pain. It brought suffering. I was more miserable in that moment than I'd ever been. My phone buzzed. Break the jar, Tim. I looked at my other hand. With the setting sun and the rainy sky, I swear the jar glowed brighter than any streetlight near me. I didn't break it because I was following her instruction. I broke it because I was angry. I broke it because I was upset. I needed a release. I raised my arm above my head and brought it down with one swift motion, shattering the jar on the concrete beneath my feet. That dark, chilly air accompanying the rain spread away like it was the shockwave of a bomb going off, and I was at the epicenter. I saw the warm yellow light from inside the jar spread rapidly across the ground and ascend into the sky. It was as if I was watching the beginnings of the universe being created, like God had just snapped his fingers and said, "Let there be light." I was engulfed in it. I could no longer see street or rain or anything dark. I felt like I was plummeting into a star going faster than the speed of light. It felt like sitting in front of a gear on a cold winter's night, but that warmth was covering every inch by body. And then I blinked. Immediately, I could feel the sheets beneath me and my back barely touching my wife's. I was staring out the window. The morning light drenched through the glass and gleamed on my face. I stood from bed and grabbed my phone. It was Friday morning. I had one text. "Let me know if you ever need another jar." I called in sick to work. I snuck into my daughter's room and greeted her with a kiss and told her she didn't have to go to preschool today. We were going to have a family day. She smiled and stretched out her arms with a yawn before curling up and falling back asleep. I got back in bed and squeezed my wife tightly. I didn't let go for hours. Stacy, our daughter, came into our room and woke us up eventually. She was jumping on the bed and shouting for us to wake up. Yesterday, I may have found that annoying. Yesterday, I may have found a lot of things annoying or monotonous or dull. But not today. Today, I pulled her under the covers in between me and Kelsey. Today was going to be a good day. Today, I was happy. Story 3. It's official. I'm an old man. For the last couple years, I've comforted myself by saying I'm in my early 70s. But math is simple and unforgiving. Today is my 75th birthday, and God, the years do fly. I'm not here for your well wishes. This is hardly a milestone I'm excited about. I'm glad to still be here, of course, but I find I have less and less to live for with every passing year. My bones ache, my kids live far away, and the other side of my bed has been empty for just over 8 months now. In fact, once I cast my vote against that goddamn Trump this November, I may have nothing to live for at all. So spare me your happy birthdays and your congratulations, if you please. I'm here because I have a story for you, and it's one I've never told before. I used to think I kept it inside because it was silly, or maybe because nobody would believe it. I've found, though, that the older you grow, the more exhausting it becomes to lie to yourself. If I'm being perfectly honest, I've never told anybody this story because it scares me, almost to death. But death seems friendlier than it used to, so listen close. The year was 1950, the setting a small town in Maine. I was a boy of 9, rather small for my age, with only one friend in the world to speak of, and his family, seemingly on a whim, decided to move 2,000 miles away. It was shaping up to be the worst summer of my life. My pop wasn't around, and my mom was a chore whore. Boy, was I proud of myself when I came up with that one, so I wasn't apt to hang around the house. With some hesitation, I decided the public library was the place to be that summer. The library's collection of books, particularly children's books, was meager to say the least. But within the walls of that miserly structure, I would find no undone chores, no nagging mother, God rest her soul, and perhaps most importantly, no other children with whom I would be expected to associate. I was the only kid with a low enough social status to spend his precious days of freedom sulking amid the bookshelves, and that was just fine with me. The first half of my summer was even more dreadful than I had imagined it would be. I would sleep in until 10, do my chores, and then ride my bike to the library. And by bike, I mean rusty log of shit attached to a pair of wheels. Once there, I would split my time between unintentionally annoying the elderly patrons and deliberately doing so. One pleasant lady actually interrupted my incessant tongue-clicking to hiss a "shut the fuck up" at me, the first time I ever heard a grown-up use the F word. Big fucking deal, I know, but in those days it was unheard of. The dreary days turned to woeful weeks. I had actually begun praying for school to start again, until I discovered the basement. I could have sworn I'd roamed every inch of that library, but one day, in the far corner behind the foreign language collection, I stumbled across a small wooden door I had never seen before. That was where it all began. The door was windowless and made from oak that looked far older than the wall in which it rested. It had a knob of black metal that quite literally looked ancient. I wouldn't have been surprised to learn it was crafted in the 17th century. Engraved on the knob was what appeared to be a single footprint. I had the sense that whatever lay beyond this door was forbidden to me, and therefore probably the most interesting thing I would encounter all summer. I quickly glanced around to make sure nobody was watching me, then turned the heavy knob, slipped behind the door, and shut it. There was nothing, only darkness. I took a couple of steps and then stopped, unnerved by the totality of the shadow which surrounded me. I waved my hands in front of me in an attempt to find a wall or a shelf or anything to hold on to. What I actually found was far more subtle, a small string dangling from above, but far more useful. I grabbed it firmly and pulled it down. Back in the day, lots of light bulbs were operated with strings, and this was one of them. My surroundings were instantly illuminated. I was standing on a small, dusty platform that looked as though it hadn't seen life in quite some time. To my left was a crickety-ass spiral staircase, made of wood and appearing ready to collapse at any second. The bulb was the only source of light in the room, and it was feeble, so when I peered over the railing to see what lay below, the bottom of the staircase dissolved into the darkness. So I was beginning to feel scared. This place, wherever I was, seemed to have no business in a town library. It was as though I were in a completely different building. But no 9-year-old likes to let a mystery go unsolved. Looking back, I wish I could tell my prepubescent self to turn around, go back, do anything else besides descending that staircase. You'll be spared a lot of sleepless nights, I'd say. But of course I didn't know that then, and I may not have listened even if I had. So instead of turning back, I took a deep breath, gripped the railing, and glared resolutely forward as I began my descent. The wood on the railing was dry and covered with splinters. I immediately let go, holding my hands out for balance as I carefully traversed the staircase. It was, or at least seemed, very long. So, and with only the dim glow from the string bulb far above me, my heart pounded mercilessly in the darkness. Even kids can sense when something isn't right, I think. They just don't always give a shit. By the time my feet reached the cement floor at the bottom, the light from the bulb above was very nearly a memory. But there was a new light source, and God, I'll never forget it. Directly in front of me was a door, massive and a deep shade of red. The light was coming from behind the door, and it shone out in thin lines from all four sides, a sinister, dimly glowing rectangle. For the second time, I took a deep breath and went through a door I shouldn't have. In contrast to the dank room I entered from, the room behind the door was blinding. When my eyes adjusted, what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was a library. The most perfect library imaginable. I gaped in wonder as I stepped almost reverently further into the room. It was beautiful. It was smaller than the library above, much smaller, but it seemed to be almost tailor-made for me. The shelves were packed with brightly colored titles. Both armchairs in the middle of the room were exquisitely comfortable. And the smell? My God, the smell was simply unbelievable. Sort of a mixture of citrus and pine. I simply can't do it justice with words, so I'll suffice it to say that I've never smelled anything better. Not in my 75 years. What was this room? Why had I never heard of it before? Why was nobody else here? Those were the questions I should have been asking, but I was intoxicated. As I gazed around at all the books and basked in the smell of paradise, I could only form one thought. I will never be bored again. In truth, boredom only hid from me for 3 years. It was on my 12th birthday, 63 years ago to this day, that everything changed. Before that day, I visited my basement sanctuary as often as I could, usually several times a week. I never saw another soul down there, yet strangely remained free of suspicion. I never removed a book from that room, but instead would pick up a particular volume wherever I had stopped reading during my previous visit. I sat, always in the same deep purple armchair, and always leaving its twin barren and directly across from myself. That armchair was mine, the other was... Well, I suppose I couldn't have articulated it then much better than I can now. But it wasn't mine, that's for damn sure. On my 12th birthday, I arrived later than usual. My mom had invited a couple classmates and some cousins over to our house to celebrate, a gesture which I found more tedious than touching. Really, I just wanted to spend my birthday sitting and reading and smelling paradise. Eventually, our guests went home, and I made it to the library about 15 minutes before closing time. That didn't matter. The workers never checked down there before they locked up. I was free to stay as late as I wished. This particular night, I was devouring the final chapters of an epic adventure, knights, swords, dragons, and the like. I didn't smell it until I read the final words and closed the book. The once exquisite aroma of that room had turned sour. I sat for a moment unsettled. Objectively, I could recognize that the smell was actually the same as it had been before, that mixture of citrus and pine. I just perceived it differently, and I didn't like it anymore. It was the nasal version of an optical illusion, you know, the one that looks like a young woman glancing backward, but all of a sudden you see that it's really an old woman facing toward you. You can't unsee that, and I couldn't unsmell this. The spell was broken. The odor also seemed, for the first time, to be coming from somewhere specific. With a fair amount of trepidation, I stalked around the room, sniffing the air like a crazed canine until I came to a shelf near the back. The shelf was perfectly normal, with the exception of one title, a large, leather-bound cover of solid faded maroon, with one striking black footprint at the top of the spine. This was the source of the smell. I opened the front cover, and saw one sentence scrawled neatly in blood-red ink atop the first page. "Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie." I stared at this sentence, mesmerized as I began to retreat to my chair. I turned a page blank. The smell became stronger. Another page blank, and the smell grew stronger still. I stopped for a moment, suppressed a gag, and continued walking. Then, as I neared the armchairs, I turned one final page, and there, in the same sinister print, was the last thing I expected to see. My own name. I dropped the book. I began to sprint toward the door, but as I shifted my gaze forward, my heart leapt to my throat, and I stopped in my tracks. The empty chair wasn't empty anymore. An aged man in a suit sat before me, one leg crossed over the other, contemplating me with piercing gray eyes and a light smirk. This was all too much. I fell to my knees and expelled the contents of my stomach onto the carpet. I wiped my mouth, staring at my vomit, when I heard the man let out a chuckle. I stared at him disbelievingly. "Who are you?" I asked, panic in my voice. The man leapt to his feet, grabbed me gently by the shoulders, and helped me to my chair. He sat once again in his own. "I fear we got off to a bad start," he said, glancing at the pile of sick on the carpet. "The smell, it does take some getting used to." "Who are you?" I repeated. "Tonight you will know hardship like you've never before known," he said. "I come as a friend, offering you refuge from it, and from all other storms which lie ahead." I wanted nothing more than to leave at that moment, but I remained seated. I asked him what he was talking about. "Oh, your mother is dead, my boy, by her own hand in her kitchen. The scene is gruesome, I must admit," he said in sorrowful tones. But was there a playful glint in his eye? "Surely you wish to avoid this path. I can show you a safer one." My blood ran cold at the horrors this man spoke of, but I did not believe him. "What do you want with me?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. He laughed, an old, raspy yelp that seemed to shake him to his bones. "Nothing but your friendship, dear boy," he said. Then, sensing I found his answer inadequate, he expounded. "I want you to come on a journey with me. My work is noble, and you will make a fine apprentice. And maybe when I'm done," he sighed tiredly, running his bony fingers through his thin white hair, "maybe then my work can be yours." I stood up, shuffling toward the door, but never breaking his gaze. "You're crazy," I told him. "My mom isn't dead. She's not." "See for yourself if you must," he said, gesturing toward the door. I threw him a contemptuous glare and bolted for the exit. As my hand closed around the knob, he said my name softly. In spite of myself, I turned around. "Your road won't be easy, friend. If it ever becomes too much for you, and I mean ever," he said, pausing to sweep his hand over the room, "you know where to find me." I slammed the door behind me and took the decrepit stairs two at a time. I exited the library, clambered onto my bike, and hightailed it home. The front door was wide open. I dismounted, leaving my bike in a heap on the ground, and approached the house cautiously. The old man was lying. He must have been. Still, tears began to sting my eyes. Heart pounding, I stepped inside and called for my mother. I heard no answer, so I turned into the kitchen. To this day, I don't know why she did it. I've lived in that small town in Maine my entire life, although I've kept mostly clear of the public library. Once, in my late 20s, I summoned the courage to step inside. Life was good at that time, and my fear had begun to morph into idle curiosity. Where the door to my basement sanctuary once stood was only a blank wall. I asked the librarian what had become of that basement, though in my heart I knew the answer. There was no basement, she said. There had never been a basement. In fact, if she had her facts correctly, city zoning ordinances prohibited a basement in the area. I've been haunted by that sickly sweet smell, that poisonous blend of citrus and pine ever since that long-ago birthday. When I saw my mother in the kitchen that day, collapsed in a pool of her own blood, I smelled it. When a man claiming to be my father knocked on my college apartment door, begged me for money, and beat me to within an inch of my life when I refused, I smelled it. When my wife miscarried our second child, I smelled it, and again when she miscarried our fourth. When our oldest son got behind the wheel of the family Buick, completely shit-faced, and got his girlfriend killed, I smelled it. I began to smell it periodically as my wife became sick. She died late last year, and now I'm alone for the first time in more than half a century. Now I smell it every day, and it feels like an invitation. A few months ago, I went back to the library, and the small oak door with the ancient handle was there, right where it used to be. My evening walk has brought me past that library every day since, but I haven't gone inside. Maybe tonight I will. I'm frightened to die, yes, but lately I'm even more frightened to keep living. The old man was right. My road hasn't been easy, and I doubt it will get any easier. Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie. He promised relief. A refuge, he said. Was he right about that too? There's only one way to find out. After all, I still know where to find him. Story 4. Did you know that early astronomers thought there were oceans on the moon? I asked, looking up from my book. My mom shifted in her bed, a tangle of IV tubes shifting with her. Of course. Oh, the moon seems like the perfect place to find an ocean. What a shame we never found water then, I said. Because those false seas, astronomers called them Maria. Mom smiled. How sweet of them to name the moon oceans after me. Well, they didn't find any oceans, I reminded her. Maybe they just didn't look hard enough, she replied, a little laugh slipping from her lips. For all of the pain she was in, all of the fear she must feel, my mother always had the kind of laugh that could light a candle. We were in her hospital room, the same one we'd been in and out of for the last year and a half. Sometimes we had a roommate, sometimes we were alone. Always she held steady enough for both of us, the rock I tied my hope to, the wall against the grief I knew was coming. Cancer is such a mundane word for something so hungry and cruel. I've noticed medicine does that a lot, covers horror with tedious language like a bedsheet over a body. Malignant, inoperable, metastasized, terminal. But when she laughed we weren't in the hospital anymore. We were home. When she laughed, she wasn't sick. She was young again, and I was a kid. And the world was a bright place begging to be explored. What a miracle my mother was. Cancer had taken so much from her, aged and hurt her, but it could never steal her laugh. That was hers to keep. How are we feeling today? The doctor asked. He came in less and less often. We could all sense this was the final stay in this room. Just brilliant, Doc, my mom said, struggling to sit a little higher. We can still go dancing later if you'd like. Though we'll have to ask for my son's blessing. Ever since his dad died, Brian's been very protective of me. I put on a stern face. "I'll need to know your intentions are pure, Dr. Bradshaw." "As the driven snow," he played along. "But I might need a rain check on the dance, Ms. Willin. I'm not as young as I used to be." He emphasized his age, running his fingers through gray-white hair. My mom tapped her bare scalp. "Right there with you, Tiger," she said. Dr. Bradshaw smiled, but I could tell he was burdened. I saw him glance at the small idol I'd placed on my mother's nightstand. The talisman was a miniature oak tree carved from gray soapstone. There were 4 faces etched into the tree, a sentry against ill health and bitter spirits. I could tell the stone tree made the doctor uncomfortable. In all honesty, I had a tough time looking at the idol for more than a few seconds. The faces were each whittled in vivid expression. The face closest to my mother's bed was smiling kindly, and the face pointed towards the door was snarling, meant to ward away harm. The final 2 faces were both weeping. All 4 shapes were too human, too raw. There was a weirdness to the stone tree that put people on edge, but I'd grown used to every shade of weird you can imagine. My mother's side of the family was full of stories of unexplained luck and mysterious tragedy, whispered secrets and unexplained deaths. By all accounts, my maternal grandmother was either an honest-to-goodness witch or full-bore, high-caliber crazy, or both. Probably both. The stone tree was from a box of my grandmother's things I'd found in the attic earlier that month. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but my mom did seem to get a bit better when I'd brought in the talisman, at least for a little while. I was daydreaming about family history and the odd box, while Dr. Bradshaw checked his charts and Mom's vitals. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked, ripping me back to reality. Dr. Bradshaw tried to keep a light tone, but I could tell he didn't have good news. The hospital hallway smelled like ammonia and birthday cake. Someone must have had a party, maybe a patient, maybe a nurse. Strange how you remember the insignificant details while your world is crashing down around you. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Bradshaw told me. "The results came in this morning. It's spreading aggressively. We held it back as long as we could, Brian. Your mom is a fighter, but right now we just need to, well, is to try to keep her as comfortable as we can." "Brian?" The wall was cracking, grief waiting on the other side, heavy and cold as an empty house. I'd known for months that this was the most likely outcome, but it still hurt to hear. Hurt worse than I could stomach. "There's nothing left to try?" I asked, fighting down the urge to throw up. "Anything, experimental, untested, anything." Dr. Bradshaw shook his head. "I'm sorry. Sometimes we just run out of options. She fought a good fight." "How long does she have left?" I asked, looking back into her room. She'd fallen asleep. "Not long, maybe days. Have you considered hospice?" The smell of ammonia and birthday cake, the steady beep of Mom's heart monitor. I tried to focus on the world around me. My hope wasn't dead yet. If medicine couldn't help my mom, maybe something older could. I thought of the box of my grandmother's things waiting in the attic. There was a lot in there I hadn't gone through yet. Books and candles and secrets and lost things. Maybe there was a cure, or at least a way to keep the fight going. "No," I said. "If all that's left is to make her comfortable, I want to take her home." The doctor smiled. "I understand. We can give you some medication, ways to help her with the pain." He put his hand on my shoulder. "Your mom's been in a lot of pain, but she'll have peace soon. You've done all you can." "I know," I lied. "Thank you." Mom lived in a small ranch house 10 miles outside of town. There wasn't much in the way of neighbors besides some woods and a creek slithering through her yard. It was a windy, warm March afternoon when I took my dying mother home. That night I began my work. I was going to turn the house into a bunker, a maze death could never solve. I would keep my mother safe. I would find a way to keep her alive. The little red book was full of ideas. Running water was an obvious place to start. The creek behind the house was barely a trickle, but it should provide some coverage to the south side of the property. Salt was next, lining the doorways and window frames, then in an unbroken circle around the entire house. This step was to be repeated daily, the red book stressed, or even multiple times per day. Even a moderate breeze played holy havoc with any salt poured outside, so it was always best to trace and retrace every few hours. Water and salt were common defenses against man's oldest enemy, and well known. The book offered other, less conventional advice. It took me nearly a week to finish carving the symbols and signs into the walls, the floors, even the trees on the property. Sometime around noon on the third day, on my back in the crawl space etching strange marks onto the underside of the floor, it struck me how ridiculous I was acting. There was no proof that any of the information in the little red book was anything other than the delusional ramblings of a bizarre woman I'd only met once or twice as a child. For all I knew, the runes meant to ward off death were actually a grocery list written in Cantonese. But I was desperate, and every time I saw my mother, she looked frailer, more fragile. So I continued carving and praying and building layers upon layers of protections to keep death far away. Making my marks took me all over the property. It was a big yard. Yeah, nearly 3 acres that blended gradually into the surrounding forest. I wasn't able to pinpoint the exact boundary where cultivated met nature. The edges simply bled together. But I did my best to create a clean border with lines between the symbols. I'd always loved the wildness here, the way you could wander a few hundred yards away from home and feel like you'd traveled hundreds of years into the past to somewhere primal. This was the perfect playground for a kid, whether I was out exploring trails or trapping minnows or spending the summer building yet another treehouse, convinced this would be the final one. It never was. I was never satisfied. The house itself, though small, was more than enough room for my mother and me. Dad died when I was 7. I don't remember much about him, just how big he seemed. Moss with a bonfire grin and arms that I thought could hold the whole world. My mom often said I took after my father. I could see it in the old pictures of him. We had the same eyes, green as moss in the summer, and the same fiery shock of red hair, enemy to every comb on the planet. The sicker Mom got, the more often she called me by my father's name. I worried when she drifted away like that, but a part of me was proud she'd mistake me for him. After all of the symbols were carved, there were a few steps left in the book to deter death from visiting. There were dozens of charms and talismans in the bottom of the old box in the attic. I sat up there combing through everything my grandmother left behind, referencing the red book, pushing the tiny charms into tidy piles. None of the idols were larger than my thumb. Oh, some were iron and others were wood, some were heavy, others light. All of them were uncomfortable to look at or touch. The attic was drafty, but not nearly enough to explain the cold that burrowed into me as I sorted the charms. I'm not particularly tall, but the attic felt like it was designed for dolls, beams so low I couldn't even walk bent over. I moved around on my knees, rough floorboards threatening splinters even through my jeans. I could have taken the box downstairs where I'd have more room, but the idea filled me with a deep unease. It seemed better to leave the box up in the attic, only taking down objects as I needed them. Up here, at least, my grandmother's items, her legacy was quarantined. The Red Book was very specific about the distribution of the totems around the house and property. I walked carefully through my mom's backyard, boots plopping in and out of mud, compass in hand. It had rained nearly every day since I'd taken my mom home from the hospital. I knew it was almost certainly a coincidence, but couldn't help wonder if the soft curtains of rain falling to the ground were for her. I placed charms in a compass rose with the house in the middle. The most disturbing objects were given places of honor at each cardinal direction. Water, salt, wards, charms, all placed carefully, intentionally. My grandmother's book promised that these would offer some degree of protection against the inevitability of death. The symbols would confuse it, the talismans distract it, and the water and salt make barriers to slow it down. But death might still find a crack to slip through, so the Red Book recommended one final trick. There was a small candle in the bottom of the box, dirty white as stained paper. When I took the candle from its case, the smell made me gag. Have you ever walked past a portable toilet in the dog days of summer? When it's so hot, the blue plastic has started to warp and bubble? Imagine that smell distilled into a finger's worth of wax. I brought the candle downstairs, placed it on the dining room table, and set it alight. The wick caught immediately, the flame burning an unusual red-brown. No heat came off of the candle, and it actually seemed cooler the closer I moved my hand to the fire. Once the wax began to melt, the smell was 10 times worse than it was back in the attic. I choked down a greasy sickness crawling up my throat and quickly left the room, shutting the French doors as I went. That helped trap the odor, but I couldn't shake the sense of nausea. I went to check on my mother. "Do you remember the day you ran away?" my mom asked, sitting in her bed, lunch untouched on the nightstand beside her. I didn't think she had any weight left to lose before she was nothing but bone and memory. Her skin was rice paper over a frame that seemed smaller every day. Her eyes, though, no matter how fragile the rest of her became, remained two little lanterns against the dark blue and bright and alive. "I didn't make it very far," I answered, "and I wasn't really running away, only stretching my legs." Mom smiled. "You told me you were leaving for the circus. You wanted to be either a lion tamer or a strong man, or maybe a fire eater. I think I wanted to be all of that combined. Young me was big on multitasking." My mother turned so she was looking out the window into the yard. "I was so scared when I found your note, the one saying you were leaving. My hands were shaking like you wouldn't believe when I called the sheriff. And then Mr. Jonas down the way. It felt like we were searching for you for half the night, even though it couldn't have been more than an hour before we found you there, lost in the woods, wandering around and shivering. You hadn't even brought a jacket." I sat next to my mom on the bed. "Yeah, I didn't exactly plan ahead for my circus escape. I remember. I remember getting over the idea real quick, but I couldn't find my way back. I'm glad you found me." "I'm glad too," my mother said, and I noticed her wipe away a tear. "I'm so glad that hour you were gone, Brian. That was the most afraid I've ever been. Afraid we wouldn't find you. Afraid you might be hurt or worse. I couldn't hardly breathe through the fear. Then, suddenly, you were there and the relief nearly knocked me over. I think we stayed up together the rest of the night watching the stars. I wanted to make sure you could find the North Star in case you ever got lost again." She turned back to me, reached out her thin hand and placed it over mine. There were still tears in her eyes, but she smiled her lighthouse smile, and for a moment I saw her just as she used to be, just as she was the night I ran away and my mom found me. I squeezed her hand. "I was scared, too. I was afraid I'd be stuck out there. What made you think of it?" "Well, I've been thinking a lot about dying lately, and—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't talk like that. And you're not going anywhere. Not for a long time." "It's okay," she said, squeezing my hand back. "It's okay. I've known real fear, and what I'm feeling now, it's not like that. I'm scared, I guess, but I'm at peace with it. I had such a beautiful life. I'm so glad I got to meet you, to be your mom." "I'm glad too," I whispered, voice breaking on the last word. "But I won't let you go without a fight," I added silently in my mind. Something was trying to get to my mom. The strangeness began the day after I lit the candle. At first it was small blips, tiny wrongs that I chalked up to my imagination. Doors I knew I'd closed at night were open in the morning. Food began to rot and spoil within days of me bringing it into the house. Eventually, food would go bad almost immediately. Every few hours, the television in the living room would either turn off, if it was running, or on if it was off. Clocks would stop overnight, always at 3:03 a.m. Shadows began sticking to the corners of rooms independent of any light sources. The shadows were stubborn, and they would linger for as long as I would stare, then disappear when I blinked. I began hearing bumps and knocks at all hours, and sometimes when I'd enter an empty room, I had a sharp, fleeting certainty that it was only just occupied. I avoided the dining room except to check in twice a day to see if the candle was still burning. The smell was vicious and would claw its way into your throat and nostrils the moment it was given a chance. I kept the door to the room shut and kept air fresheners running in the surrounding rooms 24/7. The funny thing was, the candle never went out, never even seemed to shrink. I could see the wax melting, but day in and day out the candle refused to change. Days marched into weeks, and the wrongness only grew deeper. My mom and I both lost sleep to vivid nightmares that we couldn't remember when we woke up. Only the echoes remained, but those were enough to leave my pulse sprinting until morning. I started sleeping in a chair in my mother's room. I did this to comfort her if she woke up confused during the night, but also because, if I'm being honest, I was too scared to sleep alone. I felt like a child running into his parents' room, convinced there was a monster under the bed. Thing is, maybe there was. By the third week, I couldn't keep doors closed. They would slam open the moment I left the room. A terrible scratching began inside of the walls. I told my mom it might be squirrels or mice, but the sound was so insistent, not like rodents milling about, more like a dog wanting in. I stopped leaving the house for supplice. Instead, I had what little food we ate delivered. I kept the curtains drawn. There was tapping on the glass every night. About a month after leaving the hospital, we were living like zombies. The dining room couldn't contain the smell of the candle anymore. The entire house was clogged with the scent. Tiny noises had graduated into full-on laughs and screams and whispers in the rooms around us. Something kicked the bathroom door so hard while I was taking a shower that the hinges warped. I covered every mirror in the house. I'd started to see things in the corners looking back at me, half-hidden faces, shapes that skittered away as soon as I turned around. Mom was drifting further and further away. She had long moments of confusion where she'd forget my name, forget where we were. Sometimes she'd think I was my dad. Other times she'd just stare at the wall for hours, growing fainter and fainter each day like a Polaroid left in the sun. But she was alive. It was clear that we were under siege by something. My world shrank to only one room, and every trip to the bathroom or to answer the door for food felt like going over the trenches. The noises kept getting worse and worse, the shadows closer, the sense of movement around the house sharper. Every now and then I would feel hot breath on the back of my neck or walk through a cold patch hanging in the air. I stopped bothering redrawing the lines of salt around the house. I knew deep in my bones that as long as the sickly candle burned, death could not take my mom away. On the 33rd day after leaving the hospital, I woke with a start from a nightmare, only to find my mom's bed empty. She hadn't been able to walk the past week at all, so my first feeling was hope that she might be improving, at least a little. Then I noticed the odor we'd been living with for weeks was gone. "Mom!" I shouted, running in bare feet out of the room. I found her in the dining room, the door wide open. She was standing at the table, frail as a neglected scarecrow, bobbing back and forth. Her hands were hovering over the candle. The flame was out. "Why did you do that?" I whispered. Mom? Mom, are you okay? I padded into the room, the wooden floor freezing cold. My mother didn't react to my presence. She just continued rocking side to side. I realized she was still asleep. Here, Mom. I gently shook her shoulder. Wake up. Her head snapped back and she nearly fell. I caught her on the way down. It felt like she weighed nothing at all. What's going on? She asked, looking around the dark room. Where? You're okay, I told her. You were sleepwalking. I was having the most unusual dream, Mom mumbled. There were so many stars and… She began to shiver uncontrollably. The cold hit me a moment later. I let out a gasp. The house was chilly before, but the dining room was near Arctic. My breath bloomed into a thin cloud in front of my face. I became acutely aware of the complete silence filling the house. Then I heard scratching. It was coming all throughout the house, deep tearing sounds at the walls around the dining room. Footsteps came immediately after, heavy and fast. Somewhere in the house, a window shattered. Brian, my mother said, holding on to me. Don't worry, I said. Everything will be… My voice deserted me as a massive shadow unfolded in the corner of the room. It was shaped like a man, but tall, so very tall, and it was fast. Before I could yell, the shadow was on us, pouring over my mother. In the space of a heartbeat, she was simply gone. No, I whispered, clawing at the dissolving shadow where my mom used to be. No, 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 no. The shadow was disappearing like a puddle, sinking into the floor. There was a texture to it, oily and too slick to hold. I thought of my mother the night she found me lost in the woods, the night I'd run away. Her face filled my memory, her lighthouse smile. I remembered the relief I felt when she found me, the overwhelming love. I held on to that feeling, clutching it close. You can't have her, I whispered. I closed my fist around the last threads of the shadow. There was a terrible sensation of pulling. It was like I'd caught a horse by the tail and it was trying to shake me. But I held on, a sense of ripping and being dragged. It was a riptide with a mind of its own, but I held on. It could not shake me. The temperature was dropping every second and I felt my vision growing dark. The last thought that ran through my head before I blacked out was a promise to myself that even if I died, my grip would hold. I wouldn't let my mother's life slip away. All sounds and light faded, narrowing to a pinprick and then going black. I woke up under a field of stars. I was lying in soft grass, still wearing my pajama bottoms and an old t-shirt. It was cool, wherever I was, but comfortably so. I stood up. There were trees all around me, tall and close, stitched together with shadows. Immediately to my right there was a road that ran straight as far as I could see, blurring into the horizon. But the stars, they were like nothing I'd ever seen before. Bright ribbons of northern lights rippled above me in green and blue and purple. Stars lit the sky like millions of lanterns floating on a still ocean. The moon shone sharpest of all, a spotlight hanging above the tree line, so close I thought I could stretch up and brush its face. "You are persistent," said a voice from the forest behind me. I whipped around but couldn't see anyone. Then a dark spot began to clarify against the gloom. The silhouette separated itself and moved towards me. I recognized it instantly as the shadow from the dining room. As it moved closer, the thing grew and grew until it touched the sky and filled my vision. A deep dread sank into me, but I stood my ground. "Give me back my mom," I shouted. The silhouette pulled away from the sky, and then it was standing in front of me, the shape and size of a tall man. But instead of a shadow, the thing had wrapped itself in stars. Miniature constellations drifted across its body, floating slowly like a time-lapse of a clear night sky. Burning brightest was the North Star, blue and warm. The space between the stars was absolute black, not a shadow, but a complete absence of light. It was the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "What are you?" I whispered. "You know," it replied. "Give her back," I begged. "Please, give her back." "I can't. It's her time, past her time. You delayed me, delayed her." I clenched my fists. "She didn't get enough time. I didn't get enough time. It's not right. It's not fair." "Of course it's not fair," the starry thing said, "but it is right. You each have your time, and at the end of it, there's me, and there is a road, and we walk it together." "Where to?" I asked. "Where are you taking her?" "I don't know. It's not for me to know, only to know how to get there." "Then I won't let you take her." I planted myself in the road. The world was still and solemn around us. The constellations drifted like clouds, and a soft breeze stirred the branches. The starry thing didn't respond for a moment. "Your mother was kind and caring. Wherever she goes, she'll have peace," it promised. "But—" the creature raised its hand. "See, did you ever stop to think that death isn't an enemy? Death simply is. It is the natural partner to life. It knows no prejudice or malice, has no designs or ambitions. Your mother spent so long suffering, felt so much pain. Instead of letting her rest, you took it upon yourself to draw her life beyond its given course. You kept her alive, but at the cost of stretching her thin, prolonging her sickness, diluting her. Did you keep her alive for her benefit or for yours?" I couldn't answer. "Stretching a life is unnatural, dangerous," it told me. "In the weeks you kept me away, you drew the attention of old things, hungry things, forces that would like nothing better than to swallow even the memory of your mother, to tear and bite until there was nothing left but pain and fear and a perfect emptiness." I shuddered, remembering the clawing sounds, the shattered window, and the laughter from empty rooms. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Can they hurt her here? Is she safe?" The stars in the shadow burned brighter for a moment. "Your mother won't walk her road alone. None of you do. I walk with you, always, to the end." "Can I see her?" I asked. "Please, let me say goodbye." It considered for several seconds. "You are persistent." And then the starry thing was gone. I was standing alone on an empty road. "Brian?" I turned to find my mother behind me on the road. She looked younger, healthier than I'd seen her in years. The frailty was gone, and my mother seemed exactly as I remembered her when she found me in the woods all those years ago. "Isn't this the most beautiful dream?" she asked, staring up at the night sky. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "A beautiful dream. I love you, Mom. I love you so much. So very much." She smiled and touched my cheek. "I love you too. Don't cry, it's okay. I'll wake up any time now. I'll see you then." I nodded, wiping at tears. "Sure, yeah. I'll see you then." "What do you think is at the end of the road?" she asked. "Do you think I'll have time to find out before I wake up?" I looked out at the road, scanning the trees for any hungry shadows. I don't know where it goes, but promise me you'll be careful." My mom smiled wider. "Oh, of course I'll be careful." "And she won't walk alone," said a familiar voice behind us both. I turned, expecting the starry thing, but the man standing on the road was entirely normal. The light from the moon was enough that I could see he had moss-green eyes and a bright shock of red hair. "Such a beautiful dream," my mother said. The man came towards us and took my mother's hand. He and I looked so alike I could see why my mother confused us when she was sick. "Take care of her, Ting," I told the man. Just please take care of her. Make sure she gets where she's going. There are things out there that want her, to hurt her. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The man squeezed my shoulder. She'll be safe, watched over. If the devil himself is waiting on the road ahead, he'll move. Or he'll be moved. I believed him. Thoughts raced through my head. There were so many things I wanted to say, questions, a million ways to say goodbye. I wanted to stretch out the moment for as long as I could, but I realized I'd already delayed my mother enough. I love you, I told them both. Goodbye. I woke up back in my dining room, sitting at the table, the unlit candle in front of me. The house was quiet and still. There was no more scratching, no sound or sense of life at all. I walked through every room. The house was empty. I was alone. I've spent the past couple months working on the house, erasing the marks I'd made, fixing up the property. Some nights I take long walks out into the forest. I'm far enough out in the country that on clear nights it's like looking up at a sea of stars. I think about my parents the most during those walks. I grieve and remember in my own way. And I wonder where their road went, if they're still traveling or if they reached their destination. I hope that their road takes them strange and beautiful places. When I walk at night, I look up for the North Star to keep from getting lost. Maybe they do the same. When it's full, I also look up towards the moon. I wonder if my parents had a chance to visit, to search for hidden oceans. I like to think they did, that the moon has at least one Maria, the one I love most. GTM. Hello.